It's certainly back to the UK with a bit of a bump. This time last week I was recording the Photowalk with, it was a sunny morning. I was on a cove above a bay in Tenerife, looking at the sun rising in the morning. Today I'm trying to chase the rain. I know the rain is on the way. So myself and Sir Barkalot have come out early for our photo walk. What's the problem? He seems a bit spooked by what's further up the track. Actually, I'll make a picture. Because you know what I'm like. I'm a bit of a sucker for those tracks that have light at one end. I need to pre-focus. I have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. I left my X100V in the car, which is currently being serviced under a seat. What, Neil? What were you thinking? So I've got my X Pro 1 with vintage lens today, 60th of a second, f8, oh no, that's a bit too, there we go, f6, 5.6 rather, and a sketchbook to start the day. One more.
New news is old news, happening to new people.
Today on the Photo Walk.
From a very early age, I was always asking lots of questions. Why is it like that? Why are they doing that? I think it just takes one image for people worldwide to understand what's happening. Basically, it's an easy language. I think we are creating, by uploading it to social media, all of our personal lives, I think we're creating a really interesting digital archive of what life is like now. Why do you want to do a certain story? Why are you a photojournalist? Why are you working on long-term stories? And by telling stories, I realized, okay, if I want to know more, I'm guessing other people also want to know more.
That's Ilvi Nearkiktian, a storyteller, a photojournalist. Her pictures have graced the most loved and known magazines and newspapers the world over. Her storytelling is extremely powerful. It's earned her a place within history and the Seven Agency. We'll discuss, for example, embedding yourself with an extreme far-right group in South Africa with an unexpected outcome, certainly not the one that Ilvi was expecting. It's the Photo Walk. You and I together once again. We've had a couple of weeks of special, making some pictures with our cameras, sketchbooking our walk together, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in. It's a show for hikers and walkers and photographers of whatever kind. A show for those who find escapism and peace away from the noise of this world, putting miles under our feet and making a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left. And today on the show, well, you've been great with your postcards, so I've got a few of those straight out the traps, really. Pictures from places you've been visiting, unusual places too. We'll talk about imperfection. Who needs to be perfect? Who wants to be perfect? Some thoughts from our friend and guide Jason Florio, who drops by. Let's get through this gate, pups. We've got to get across the railway here. Oh, there's a train coming. Some thoughts from our friend and guide Jason Florio, who drops by to tease us about life and photography in West Africa. Plus, it being the first Friday of the month, it's assignment week, and our very special guest on next week's show, the celebrated street photographer Phil Penman, will be setting, I think, there we go, pups. It's the 7:25 pinstripe to Londinium. Come on. Yes, and Phil Penman will be setting, he's next week's guest, who'll be setting, I think, one of the more challenging challenges that we've had, but I know you're going to rise to it. And we have one of the most beautiful play-out songs today, but you shouldn't really be talking about the end of the show, really, should you? That's like, I don't know, a bit like planning your flight home from your holiday when you've just stepped into paradise on your first day. 397 episodes in. None of this would be possible without some special help from our extra milers. And do I have an extra mile show for you this week? I'll tell you about it a little bit later on in the program today. And of course our friends at mpb.com, a website where you can safely buy, sell and trade used camera gear online, a part of the circular economy. If you're buying, you get peace of mind with a 6-month guarantee, and if you're trading or selling, MPB will send a courier to pick up the kit on the day you say. They'll make sure that it's all graded properly and you get paid into your account quickly. MPB is a very easy to use website. I've been using them since day dot, really. My X100V that I sincerely hope is in the back of the car that's been serviced, still, it's at the garage as I speak to you. My X100V came from mpb.com. I love using mpb.com, but I'm hoping not to have to buy another X100V through them just yet. Anyway, go to mpb.com if you want to buy, sell or trade quality used camera kit in the UK, the US or Europe. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Another express just going past, check. Garibaldi's, yes, last week I couldn't get Garibaldi's. And the Canaries this week, check. Walking shoes on, definitely, check. And something else on my list. And hopefully an X100V when I pick up the car later on from the garage. Not quite checked yet. Let's walk.
The Photowalk.
I haven't used my X Pro 1 for quite a while, actually. It's been, 3, 4, 5 months since the last time I used it on a photo walk. There's my favourite tree ahead of me on the path. It's a sort of 45-degree angling tree which intersects the path as you walk along it, grown straight out the middle of the path. And I photograph it all year round. Let me get a picture. It's quite a bleu day in terms of weather. 60th of a second. Pups, don't walk into frame. The last, probably let's get another one of those. Another sketchbook image from my walk today. There we go. The last, 4, 5 photo walks, 3, 4 photo walks haven't featured Barney. Barney has been, over the summer holiday, very much commandeered by the family. But today I have him, and I know why, because they've said, it's going to rain today. It is, it's raining, 80% chance of rain from around about half an hour's time for the entire day. You take the dog today? I said, no probs. We're going to go for a photo walk. Come on, Barnes. Let's go this way. It feels nice, but the sky is a bit worse. Actually, over there, yeah, there we go. There's the grey clouds. There's the grey clouds of doom coming in. We're doomed. Michael Mixon is the first letter back from our 2 weeks of specials. Well, 3 episodes, actually, if you count the walk that I took with Tom Humble as well. And the pictures he sent, all the pictures sent today, I'll put on the show page for episode 397. Getting very close to the 400th. Hi, Neil. I really appreciated hearing the letter from Marilyn Davis in episode 391, where she talked about embracing imperfections in our pictures. I regularly cast most of my images into the 0-star heap of shame in my Lightroom catalogue because of some flaw, real or imagined, but mostly real, or because they didn't meet the expectation I had for them. I did this most recently on our trip to the East Coast. While in DC, I wanted to get one of those quintessential shots with in-focus passengers alongside a blurry subway car that's either approaching or leaving. Come on, pups, this way. He's funny. He's looking back along a particular piece of path today, almost like he's been... What have you been spooked by? What's the matter? Anyway, while I did manage to get one, most of my shots were of blurry subway cars and blurry humans, all of which I immediately cast aside as failures. But, upon subsequent perusals, there was one of these blurry images that kept catching my eye, asking it to linger an extra second before moving on in disgust. My word, Michael, you are mean on yourself. I eventually came to the conclusion that I actually like that photo, despite its obvious flaws, because it captured an energy or a mood that was more attuned to my actual experience than the more staged photo I'd set out to get. So, life is imperfect. Well, we're imperfect. So maybe in some cases, says Michael, an imperfect photo is more honest than a perfect one. Best regards, Mike. And I agree with you, Mike. Wholeheartedly, imperfection, it's a fundamental aspect of living, isn't it? Of our lives. It's what makes us human. Brilliantly and imperfectly. Edit that bit, Neil. Imperfectly. I like that. I've invented a new word. Pups. New word. Oh, he doesn't care. He's just grabbing a stick. Have you got your stick? Stick of the day. Come on, get that one. Let's go. Yes, imperfectly human. It's what gives us, or rather gifts us, actually, empathy, isn't it? Empathy and understanding. And you know me with my love for quotes. Well, here's one from Thomas Edison, all about imperfection, who said, he did say this one, didn't he? I'm sure he did. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. See, he knew a thing or two about imperfection, but I think they also had character, don't they? This is character and uniqueness. I remember the producer at the BBC who instructed me, essentially, to leave mistakes in. Don't edit them out. I mean, editing was a touch trickier in those days because it was all done on tape with splicing tape, and you had to cut the tape. And if you wanted to take ers and ums out, I tell you, it's a very good way of, as a presenter at least, of training you not to have so many ers, because you know you don't really want to be taking them out. But these days, with digital, much easier. Much easier to snip the ers and the ums and the pauses. Well, certainly quicker to snip them out. But this producer, he certainly instilled in me that it was important to leave your mistakes in, because it makes you, quote, from a very early day, let's get through this gate, as far as a lesson goes, it makes you human. Imperfection is human. That's not an excuse for sloppy work, of course. But actually, to use a photographic example, one of my fondest pictures from shooting weddings as we walk past this very full lock along the canal where I'm walking today. My favourite canal walking along the Kennet in West Berkshire. Yeah, one of my favourite wedding pictures comes from, it's actually from a sad event. It's an end-of-life wedding where the bride danced, and I'm not being dramatic about this in any way, but danced probably one of her last dances and wasn't expected to do even that. This particular picture, well, it's out of focus, or motion blurred if you like. It's a mixture of the two probably. It's a complete grab shot. I had no idea she was going to dance, and I turned on a sixpence to get the picture. And the composition means that I'm a little bit too close with my 35mm. I wanted more context, you see, with friends in the background. When I'm doing dance shots, often I'm looking for a context opening shot. But, despite all the narrative, none of that mattered or matters. It's in terms of the moment absolutely perfect for all its imperfections. And it's a picture that I almost didn't make because I thought, well, I'm not in the perfect place. I haven't got the perfect lens on for this particular picture. The lighting isn't perfect. But after, I took the picture and I settled myself. I did step back. What are you doing, pups? I'm trying to tell a story. Don't start biting your lead now. I did nail the focus after that. I did all the technical things you might expect from me, but the picture, the one that really has the emotion of that first moment of the unexpected dance is the one that, well, let's just say it would not win a Camera Club prize. So thank you, Michael. Wise words to start back on the photo walk with about imperfection today. Puppy, what do you want? See, when I go out for my photo walks, minus a bark a lot, we don't have to dig into the treats tin quite so much. Well, not for me anyway. Go on, have one of these. Will this keep you quiet? Stop chewing your lead. It's a bad habit. There we go. Bit of ASMR to start the day. Perfect. Lovely. On the packet they say these are tasted by humans. Shall I taste one? Pups, hang on, let me taste one. I'm fibbing to you. That was him chewing, not me. If my voice seems a bit gruff today, That's because it is. That serves me right for singing loudly during the dancing at the wedding I was photographing yesterday. I've done, I will have done 5 weddings in 8 days, which, I used to do that sort of thing all the time. You're an old man, Neil, now. You should be resting in your chair easy of an evening. Not doing 5 and 8. No, I can still do 5 and 8, but I tell you what, when you sing along, it was a really good band. It was a fabulous band. If you're singing along to the band as well, the voice takes a bit of a pummeling. La 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 la. I hope there's not a barge hidden in the reeds over there. They've just heard me doing my morning warm-ups. Right. If you'd like to send a picture or a story into the show, I'd love to hear from you. Please keep sending them in. It's the fuel behind the show, without a shadow of a doubt. Send them to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide. Please. Oh, Pups has gone in the river. Oh, no. I've got the hire car. Or rather the loan car. It's the worst loan car in history. I was told, don't have dogs in it, but this thing's filthy. Oh, Pups. I was hoping you wouldn't go in the water today. 2,500 pixels wide. Please don't put borders around things if you can manage, please, because we have a particular design for the show pages. And if you could avoid watermarking, please try to steer clear of that. I will, of course, put credits to you and your work and your Instagram and your websites, etc. Flickr, X. See, I'm beginning to remember X. Not Twitter. Right, let's have a brace of Wish You Were Here's, which will be on the show page today. I'm extending this, by the way, into the rest of the year, the Wish You Were Here's. I just think we'll keep doing it because when I've tried it in the past, we've failed dismally. And suddenly your Wish You Were Here's, the postcards, the picture postcards you're making, are flooding in. Well, at least one a week. No, actually more. So thank you so much for that. Show us where you live, where you're travelling. It's so special, and it's nice to see where people are around the world, the adventures that you are having. There's a tree up ahead of us. So many trees have come down. I mean, we're not in a storm area like some parts of the world are, but I just noticed look at that, Pups. That's right across I'll tell you what, there'll be no cyclists along this path today. That's right across the path. That's a fresh fall. That must have fallen last night. How are we going to get across it? Right, what are your jumping legs like? Are they good? Come on. Wow, look at this. Let me get a picture. Now, the other problem with my X Pro 1 is that the manual focusing... Pups, come back, please. The manual focusing where I use the peak... the white peaks to... Pups, come back here. Come on. To help me focus, to aid me in my focusing when I'm on manual, because I'm using a vintage lens. That's not working properly. God, dear Neil. Everything's falling apart. So let's get a picture of this. It's going to be dog inspecting tree, actually. Here we go. Everything's going to be at 60th today. Hold hand, hold your camera really steadily, Neil. Here we go. With a dog looking at the tree thinking, how the devil am I going to get over that? Come on then, this way. Or best thing for me to do, actually, Pups, come here. I'm going to take you off your lead. It's been on his lead, on his retractable. You can squeeze underneath that. I can't. Oh, I've split my difference. Come on. There we go. See? I knew you could do it. You've earned a treat. Right, let's dig into these postcards while Pups has another treat. Here we go. Another one of those. Enjoy. First one is from Simon Blakesley. Fantastic picture on the show page today. Your postcard, your Wish You Were Here, is of a red float plane on a pontoon sat on a very still lake with the early morning mist devouring the nicotine-coloured backdrop. It's an absolutely beautiful picture. Perfect, you see. Now, I know we were talking about imperfection a moment ago. This is perfect. And perfect as a postcard in particular. So thank you for this. And if I turn it over, here's Simon's words. Though you'd be writing very small. When I said write the postcard as well. The idea was that you would imagine the amount of words you'd be able to get onto a postcard usually. Hi, Neil. Your adventure awaits, says Simon. We just need the sun to burn away the fog before the flight can depart from the lake. A wonderful way to explore the Yukon. Oh, that's where this was made. Beautiful. And take in the territory's rugged scenery. Best ways from an aircraft such as this Canadian-built de Havilland Beaver. I thought de Havilland was a British plane. Of course, they could be built anywhere in the world. I appreciate that. Only 73 years young. This classic plane is still going strong as it transports wilderness adventurers, canoeists and hunters, along with their kit, to and from remote wilderness lakes. I bet you don't tell the passengers that when they get in, though. Yeah, this plane's 73 years old. Is it, really? I mean, I don't mind when I'm in one of those vintage cars on my way to a wedding, but strap some wings on the side. Not quite so sure, Captain. One of the best things, says Simon, about living in Whitehorse, Yukon, Canada, is having a float plane base to visit early in the morning when the air temperature drops and the air becomes saturated with moisture. While the picture doesn't present views of mountains and glaciers and rivers, it's at these quiet moments that I feel truly fortunate to be an aviation photographer here in the Yukon, still a relatively untouched and wild place on our planet. And an hour later, the fog lifted sufficiently to take flight and an adventure. As always, with kind regards, Simon Blakesley. Simon, just brilliant. I can definitely hear the silence in the picture, if that doesn't sound odd. And then one from Paul Morgan. Hi, Photowalk, having a great time in Faraway. See, we've been to Canada, now we're going to Indonesia. A mix of cities, beaches, countryside, eating good and, he says in brackets, not so good chicken innards, anyone. Food and indulging in cocktails. There's very little dark beer, that's my excuse. The west coast of Lombok has the most stunning sunsets. As the sun drops towards the horizon, it silhouettes Mount Agung. I hope I'm saying that correctly, I think I am. On neighbouring Bali as the skies darken, the swifts dogfight with bats for the twilight's flies. Paul, this is getting... well, it's like poetry. Dog-fighting bats and swifts. At the other end of the day, I visited two of Java's active volcanoes. The Mount Bromo complex consists of the steaming Bromo, flat-topped Mount Batuk and the imposing Mount Semeru. And an occasional steam cloud gives away a small eruption, a volcanic fart, if you will. See, the poetry has become a little bit more base now, Paul. In this landscape, you can't take a bad photo, believe me, I've tried. Mount Egan, by contrast, is a working volcano, but a very dangerous one. 200 or so miners with little or no PPE battle against noxious fumes and the risk of falling into the world's largest acidic lake to harvest raw sulfur rock, which oozes from pipes embedded in the volcanic vents. Full baskets of rock, sometimes 50 or 60 kilos, they're lugged up the crater rim before walking larger loads to the refinery, and all for, get this, 50p a day. Wishing you were here, but, well, then you are, thanks to the good hotel Wi-Fi. So thank you. And that picture, that particular picture of gent lugging sulfur up the volcano, God dear, that is what you call strong, hard, manual work. I'll pop it on the show page today. So send your wish you were here's to stories@photowalk.show. And if you can make it, I know we've had a few threes, but if you can make it a single picture in terms of postcards, I know postcards come in 3s and 5s and 7 images on the front, etc. But just for the sake of the show page, to make it really stand out in the space that you have, then if you can make them single images, fantastic. Right, more of your postcards coming up over the weeks to come. I have a feeling we might be making some of the photo retreat in Inverness in a few weeks' time as well. Right, my guest today, Ilvi Niakiktian, is a photojournalist. She's a filmmaker, podcast host actually now, an educator. She's been creating and sharing stories for almost 2 decades, maybe a little bit more actually. She's based in Utrecht in the Netherlands, and she's represented now by 7 photo agency. And I'd say it's been best part of 2 years in the making, this conversation, because we've always just missed each other when we're trying to set this up. Such are her travels. Winner of a World Press Photo Award, Ilvi is the first woman to win the Dutch Silver Camera Award for Photographer of the Year, and was named the first ever Photographer Laureate of the Netherlands in 2013. Her pictures, well, they've graced the New York Times, the Washington Post, National Geo. It's my dream to have a picture in the National Geo. What do you think, pups? Will we ever have one of those? I'm getting nothing from him today. The Guardian and Stern and Der Spiegel and Time, well, the list would go on. This will be the first, I think, of at least a few conversations with Ilvi. There's 2 parts of it today, but I'm certainly hoping to speak with her more in the future, because there are so many stories to tell. So here's part 1 of today's conversation with the photojournalist, the storyteller, Ilvi Neerkitjian.
Ilvi, I was going to go into my first question, which is all about where your photographic story starts, but I'm going to divert immediately from that, because I know that you're talking to us today from a boat. Now, we share a couple of, I think, things. Well, one from our childhood. We both wanted to be lorry drivers. That seems a really weird way to start an interview.
Random.
But you did, didn't you? You wanted to be a lorry.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured it was gonna be the coolest job.
Yeah.
I love driving on highways. My dad always used to drive in a big van, so our family holidays were always a lot of driving and in that little like old Mercedes bus van thing, and I loved it. And I figured if I become a lorry driver, I can do this the rest of my life. Travel through Europe in a big lorry.
Yeah, well...
Yeah, I didn't make it in the end.
I think you may have made the right decision. But my dad owned a van, and that's why I used to sit up front on the bench seat and think, this is it.
This is the dream.
You're above the world.
Totally.
You stop for coffees at at all the rest places, and I just thought, what a way of living this would be. So we both share that.
This is funny. I've never met someone who has exactly. I remember sitting in the front seat, the long seat.
Yeah, that's it.
That would hold like 3-4 people, like a bench.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is the life. I just could feel the freedom.
Yeah.
You're above like the road. You feel like the king of the road.
Well, here's a question. Well, king or queen. Here's a question then. This might be even more left field. See, I remember, now I know you're into sound, and we're going to talk about sound as we talk over the next however many minutes. I remember very, very well, clearly, the sound of the indicator. Do you remember the sound of Dad's indicator? Because
I do.
It was a Bedford van, the first one. It used to go dink-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink. It was a very sharp, and I remember that. I hear it in my sleep. I don't hear my dad, but I do hear the indicator.
Same experience here, totally. And we would also sleep with the whole family at like the truck stops.
Yeah.
And you could hear the trucks at night going when they were shut up. And that sound is also just stuck in my mind. And it just brings back these great memories of going on family trips.
Yeah. This already has to be one of my favourite starts to an interview ever. But the second thing is, Ilvi asked me just a moment ago, shall I shut the window? And I thought, well, are there cars going past or something? And you said to me, no, it's because I'm on a boat.
I'm on a boat.
And that's another thing I share with you. I always
wanted
to live on a boat, and you're doing it. And you're doing this.
I am doing this. Well, I grew up on a boat, so I have 3 siblings, so we're 4 kids in our family, and all of the kids were born on the boat, except for me, because I had, when I was being born at home at the boat, when the birth was happening, they figured that my heart rate was not correct. It was a bit slow.
Oh.
So I'm the only child that wasn't born in the boat, and they rushed me to the hospital. They rushed my mother to the hospital. And when I was born, they actually figured out there was nothing wrong with my heart. It was just slow because I was sleeping. But I still regret that I slept through my own birth, because if I wouldn't have, I would have been born on the boat. And now I'm the only one that only arrived at the boat when I was 1 day old.
Oh.
And I lived here until I was 18. And I'm here now house sitting my dad's boat.
But that's the thing about being on boats, isn't it? That probably slows your heart rate down. That's why you slept through your own birth.
Yes, that's why. I think that's... you're right. I think that's why.
So anything we're likely to hear through the window is actually the lapping of a boat that's going past you.
Yeah, you hear the waves kind of slowly going against the houseboat. Yeah.
Well, look, let's start then with the high school in the States, because this is where the photographic story starts. You took a photo class. I mean, boy, do I wish we had or I wish we'd have had photo classes at my school. We had nothing like that. You were lucky enough to be at a school where there were photo classes and dark rooms.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I went to high school, did my whole schooling in the Netherlands, where I'm from. But I finished high school very early at the age of 16. And then the next step was going to university. And I really didn't know what I wanted to study because I was so young. So I took a gap year to America. It was an amazing experience, but I thought I would end up in New York because that's the only place I knew in America. But I was in this program and they placed me in Sturgis, South Dakota, which South Dakota is already the middle of nowhere. And then Sturgis is really the middle of nowhere, a beautiful place. And I lived on a ranch for a year with a great family, a host family. Then I went to high school and I didn't know what classes to take. I could pick everything from cheerleading to English, and I had a free choice. And then I thought, photography, that could be interesting. But I didn't have any interest for it. But I just thought, okay, might be nice.
Yeah.
I also thought that will be one of the easier classes. I'm not going to take math. So I just picked all the fun stuff. Then on the first day, I ended up working in the darkroom, and I just couldn't believe it. The whole feeling of seeing a picture appear. Yeah. And I was addicted from that moment on.
How did the roadmap, though, then reveal itself to you, those steps from those initial classes? There's quite a gulf between having fun and escaping math and making this into a career.
Yeah, well, that was the funny part, because when I was in that class, there was the teacher explained to me that this could also be a job. And I didn't believe him. I told him, what do you mean this can also be a job? Because I didn't know about having a photo studio or being a photojournalist. I just couldn't believe this could be a job. But he explained it to me. And then I figured I will sign up for journalism school in the Netherlands. And I did so knowing that I wanted to become a photojournalist. And from there on, the path was pretty straight because I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to take pictures that had something to do with the news. And I just kind of kept going.
Well, did you grow up with a fascination about the news then? Was there something inherent in you that thought, right, I need to, I have a thirst for knowledge. I need to learn more. And was that in you anyway, or?
Yeah, there was one. It wasn't necessarily the news. And that's also why I got distracted a bit in the first years of my career, because I thought for a couple of years that it was the news that was driving me. And it took a while for me to realize that it was human stories driving me. And that's something that I had from a very early age. I was always, well, like many kids, asking lots of questions. Why is it like that? Why are they doing that? What is so-and-so like? You know, it's like these kind of questions. I was always interested at watching at a very young age, documentaries on television, more interested in those than maybe even watching cartoons. I was always interested in the human side of stories. But then when I started photojournalism for a couple of years, I thought the interest was actually the news. And that really took a few years to realize it wasn't.
Although there's a subtlety, isn't there? I mean, people are the news.
Exactly.
And it's, I suppose, people's plights that you seem to have become really interested in from looking at your work. These are very personal stories that you tell, aren't they?
Yeah, many of them are. I would say in the early stages of my career, the stories were more news driven. They became more personal, or they became more like in-depth storytelling, I would say after 2011 or 12, when it's a weird story in some way. I worked on a reportage of a racist camp in South Africa, and then it won at the World Press Photo.
It did,
which was amazing. Yeah. I didn't even believe it when they called me.
No, it's well deserved as well. And we are going to talk about that story, but you couldn't believe it at the time.
I totally not. I actually told the guy who called me, like, oh, stop it. I thought it was my brother doing a prank call. And I told the guy, I was like, my brother's name is Esley. And I was like, Esley, stop it. This is not funny. And and then the guy from World Press was like, no, it's really...
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. But what happened is that I won in a certain category, and it was called contemporary issues. And I had never heard of the word contemporary ever. So I had to Google it. And when I Googled contemporary issues, I realized those are all the kinds of stories that I'm interested in. It's not the news, it's contemporary issues. So just winning that award gave me more direction into my career, because I knew that is what interests me.
So it was a serendipitous route, really, wasn't it?
Totally.
You weren't expecting it at all. I've heard you say that you believe in the power of the still images is as strong as it ever was. I know you're now working more in multimedia, and I do want to talk about sound. I've mentioned it already, but I do want to talk about sound, and perhaps we'll talk about the moving image as in an image that moves rather than emotional. Well, why do you still believe that the still image is the most powerful of that? If you like, of that sort of holy trinity, why do you think it's the still image that's the most precious?
I think it's because people want the same thing.
Yeah.
Love, safety, togetherness, things like that. And I think if you look at images that are about kind of intimate moments, or images that are really strong in that sense, that have a story to tell, I think it just takes one image for people worldwide to understand what's happening. Basically, it's an easy language. When you see a picture that's really good, that has emotion in it, people will understand what's going on. Doesn't matter in which country you are, doesn't matter which language you speak. So that's why I feel the still image is a very strong way of telling a story. Yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day, Ylvi, if I remembered some still images, in particular still images that impressed upon me during my formative years, perhaps. I didn't start out as a photographer, so they wouldn't necessarily be formative years as a photographer. And I remember my dad kept an image from 1966 that stays with me. So when somebody says, is there a particular image that you remember? It was the World Cup of 1966, which I apologise, but all Englishmen bash on about this. They really do. Of Jeff Hurst holding the cup. That I remember. But the other one is a really dark image of an airliner lying on its side in a field in Scotland, which somebody who subsequently, the late Tom Stoddart, subsequently went on, I'd like to believe became a friend, who made an image that I saw in a newspaper years ago that really horrified me. Still images have the power to be joyous and have that exceptionally dark side. And you've seen both in your career, haven't you? I mean, you do seem to sort of, you waver between the two all the time.
Yeah.
Which
I really do, because I think for the earlier stages in my career, I focused more on the darker parts of life.
Yeah,
I remember even when I was in my first year, I was always drawn to stories about death, about... Yeah, and I don't even know why. It was just the kind of stories that interested me. And for the longest time, I felt this was just my career path. I was going to work on heavier stories, emotionally heavy. And then I realized after doing this for 15 years that it was actually right before COVID when I realized, okay, I need to go into some more softer storytelling. Then COVID happened, and that made it quite difficult because I was photographing the whole pandemic. Yeah. But afterwards, I made sure to steer a little bit towards more softer stories. You can see it when you go to my Instagram. On the bottom of my Instagram, you see more tough stories, and then the higher you go, the softer it gets.
Isn't that interesting? I love the birthday story, by the way, with the 100 people from the Netherlands celebrating birth. I mean, that's an example of a softer story. A wonderful idea, a really simple idea, actually.
Totally simple, yeah. Although in producing it, it was a horror show. Oh. Because I wanted every age. So I was basically photographing birthdays from the age 1 to 100.
To 100, yeah.
But it became impossible impossible, because at one stage after working on it for 2 years, I was looking for a Dutch guy with Moroccan descent who was living in a certain province who had to turn 63 because 63 was the only age I still needed. And I also just needed one extra Moroccan guy. Right. It needed to be a man in that certain province because I really wanted to make sure it reflected the whole country. It was becoming insane. It was so difficult, but it was lovely to work on because everyone was happy. It was all about the birthday party. So I think when you photograph people celebrating, you kind of learn a lot about what the country is about, what a certain country is about.
I wonder whether people have more...
This is waves, by the way. Can you hear them?
Oh, is there what? I think I can. I'm not sure. But that's when somebody says
they're very loud here.
Well, when somebody says to you, Ilvi, they say, "Can you hear waves?" It's almost when somebody puts a shell against your ear and you think, "Yeah, there's the Atlantic Ocean." It's nothing at all.
You just kind of pretend to hear it. Yeah. Oh yeah, I can vaguely hear it.
Are there dolphins? Can I hear dolphins? I think I can. The fact that people now, I mean, more people are photographers than ever. We used to say at the start of the show, we haven't said it for a while, so I've already forgotten the figure. I think it was 7 billion. 7 billion people have access to something that will make a photograph, which is an enormous figure.
It's crazy.
And I wonder whether that could be the enduring light of photography, though, couldn't it? That people now have become themselves photographers, whether you like that word with a lowercase or an uppercase, I don't know.
Well, I would say about 10 years ago when the phones were getting better cameras, of course, there were so many people saying, oh, this is the end of our time as photographers. And I've never felt that way. I really always have said, and I still feel that way, is that, yes, everyone can take a photograph. Everyone can take a good photograph. I also believe that. But to tell a story, to dive in, to make it a journalistic approach, to do research, to go to places, to really focus on one story, that I think, it takes so much time. People are not going to take the effort. So, and I actually believe that by everyone having phones and cameras and access to photography, I think we are creating, by uploading it to social media, all of our personal lives, I think we're creating a really interesting digital archive of what life is like now. I think it's marvelous, actually. It never really scared me. I would say AI scares me more than the fact that we all have cameras.
Well, AI is something I shall have to stop making excuses for referencing, because whether we like it or not, it's here.
100%.
And it's in terms of this, the context of this conversation, I think photojournalists are going to have to find a level of trust between them and the audience, or the audience and them, because that sort of belief in what we are seeing and what we are consuming, we'll need to believe what photojournalists are making, won't we? Because inevitably some stuff is going to slip through the net. I mean, I heard somebody suggest the other day that, well, it's okay because people will believe it because photojournalists have made it and it's in a publication which has some credibility. But stuff's going to seep through that.
I think there always will. I think when the pandemic hit, I don't know what it was like in the UK or in America, but in the Netherlands, people were again kind of resubscribing to newspapers because they really wanted to know where what was real, what wasn't, and so on. So I think that did show us that in general, people have a high trust, not everyone, of course, but in the media. But we will always make mistakes, and the internet doesn't help because things can be twisted very easily. I still believe that there's room for newspapers and newspaper journalism. On the other hand, it was last year when I was photographing a youth summer camp. And of course, all the young people, the young kids were asking me, so why are you photographing? What are these pictures for? And I told them I was photographing for one of the biggest newspapers in the Netherlands. And none of them knew the name.
Oh.
They were like, what? What is that? I've never heard of it. And that made me realize that I'm 38 and I always have the feeling I can still relate to people that are 15 years younger than I am and people that are older than I am. But that made me realize I actually didn't relate as much to the much younger generation who really don't have a clue about newspapers.
And this is a really good opportunity to talk about the printed work. Because I've seen your work. It's as an exhibition work. I've seen films made about it as well. It's something you believe in, isn't it? That you really want people to experience your work large format.
I do. I mean, I believe that people want to experience something. I am a big believer in print, But I also believe that in 10 years from now, print is not going to, and print, I mean, like newspapers. We're not going to have newspapers anymore, I think, in about 10 years. I'm a big believer in how I like the medium, but I also feel it doesn't matter if it moves online. But what I do believe in is that when people want to experience a story, is that one of the best ways to experience it if something is immersive. So if you're standing in a room and there's video and photography or 3D installation or video that's kind of moving around you or audio that is like an audioscape above your head, I really feel that if it's immersive, you engage more and you remember it better and it impresses you more and you feel more emotionally connected to it. So that's the kind of installations and the kind of things I really would love to make more.
Well, so
it is also that it's more expensive to produce.
It is, and I remember watching Salgado in London. Have you been to one of the Salgado?
I've been to one,
immersive?
years ago here in Rotterdam.
But the immersive ones with the sound of the jungle and everything, it was. I have to say, I left there when my heartbeat was really slow. I think it's probably the most chilled I've ever been. I believed I was there.
Exactly.
I could almost smell the exhibition, which sounds an odd thing to say, but I
totally understand. And I think if we would make more things like that, the problem with these kind of immersive shows or immersive experiences is how to get people to go there. But once they're in an exhibition space or at a photo festival, experiencing something that is happening around them, I think the impact you make is bigger.
I want to move on to Afrikaner Blood and Prepared to Flee, but if we can part those for just a moment, we'll start with Born Free. I think I'm doing it in the right sequence there. What is it about South Africa, firstly? Because you've made a lot of stories there. The continent of Africa, and we're very lucky to be making an expedition / retreat in the Gambia at the start of 2024. And I've said to people in the past, once you've been to Africa, once you've experienced, and sometimes it's a particular part of it, it's very difficult not to go back again and again and again.
Very true.
What is it about South Africa? Now, South Africa has a complex relationship with itself, you might say. And I wonder if that's what takes you back there.
Well, it of course has a very difficult colonial past where the Dutch, I am Dutch, where the Dutch were very much the problem. That's one of the reasons that later on, while I was working on my project, that really interested me. But when I went there for the first time, I was actually 20 years old and on an exchange. My university had organized an exchange.
Right.
And what really drawn me, how do you say it, to the country is the fact that the divide between black and white, something that I had not encountered before in the Netherlands in this way. At that age. Racism is definitely here in the Netherlands, very much all around you, sadly. But at that age, I had never really experienced it that much because I was in a mixed school and I had a lot of friends with different colors. But when I went to South Africa, I went to a town where the one side of the village was in a township.
Yeah.
I had a lot of poor black people. And the other side of town where the university was, it was a little bit mixed, but mostly white people. And that fact shook me that much that I just constantly was thinking about how unfair the society was. And then, of course, I read more about it and I learned more about colonialism. And about 4 years later, I returned to South Africa as a photojournalist and I started my project, Born Free. And it lasted 12 years.
I know.
Because it's such a difficult subject. It's about racism and youth. And every year I thought, okay, this year I'm going to finish my project. But it's so difficult to photograph racism and to make a project about racism because sometimes it's not very visual at all.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you made, because when I look at your pictures, I think, well, I can see exactly the racism that you're talking about. So when I've heard you say in the past, and you have in the past, that racism is a difficult thing to photograph, I was thinking, well, from my limited experience of South Africa, I just remember compounds with high walls, electric fencing, and so on and so forth. And so that, for me, became a significant picture of the society as I saw it.
It is. It's the division between kind of shacks in townships and the high walls and the big mansions with swimming pools on the other side. That's definitely there. But what I was trying to do is to kind of get these two into one frame, because then you can see the great divide. And that's very difficult. There was a very clever photographer. I forgot his name, unfortunately. I feel bad about it. But he did a drone story where he just flew above one of the richer parts of town in Johannesburg, and from the drone footage you could see that there was one road. On the left side of the road it was all township living, and on the other side it was rich and swimming pools. But in my pictures I really had to look for these subtle moments where people were either interacting or they weren't, or kids were being teased in school or not. Was this racism or not? Oh, hey, I'm at a school where the whole swim team, almost the whole swim team, 200 students, is white, except for 2 black students. You know, so it was so subtle, even though you could sometimes really see it, like for instance with the swim team. So that's why my project lasted for a very long time, because in the daily street life, it was sometimes very difficult to see.
And Ilvi Kiktian returns shortly for part 2 of our conversation. Right, should we do another? Let's get another sketchbook. I tell you what, this rain is definitely coming in. You can feel it, can't you, when it's on its way? We are going to get soaked. But the light is slightly better. Right, another picture back along the path. Oh, Kennet and Avon Canal. I've missed you. Right, manual focus. Oh, I'm going to have a real look at this camera when I get back to base with a cup of coffee later on this morning, just to sit down and really study why the peaking system is not working on the camera. Oh, pups, what have we done? I tell you what, if the X100V, I left it under... I know what I did. I went out to the post office. I think I was sending a flask, actually. Not quite sure. I was sending a few things anyway. I went to the post office and I had the camera with me, and I put it definitely under the passenger seat. Hid it. Got back, unloaded the car, and I forgot the camera. That's where it is. I'm absolutely certain of it, and I'm hoping it's still there after this the work has been done. I'm not, by the way, accusing all mechanics of being thieving Herberts. No, not at all. It might be coming across like that. It's just that I have had stuff in the past that has gone walkabout, and maybe it's me. Maybe I've misplaced stuff, and I've thought there. See, I'm trying to rescue myself. Should we talk about Africa? Yeah, let's. Africa 24 still has a few places. We're off together to discover a small part of West Africa, the Gambia. It's a retreat, it's an expedition, in part it's a holiday as well. It's an all-in-one exciting adventure to the smiling coast, as they call it, of Africa, spending time with the people of this wonderful small country. River trips, markets, heaving markets, definitely. Wildlife, villages, music, making documentary projects, and experiencing the food of the region. It's a 10-day photo trip. It's guided by 3 photographers, including yours truly, and filmmakers, actually. 2 of us, 3, I suppose 3 of us, because one's a film producer. It's a 10-day photo trip. It's guided by us 3, myself, Andy Thompson, and the photojournalist Jason Florio. It's on the menu at the top menu at photowalk.show. 4 places have been confirmed now. 4, possibly just before. I've got to check with this because I've just returned from holiday. Possibly a 5th, maybe even a 6th. There's just a handful of places remaining. But here's one of our guides. It's Jason, who I mentioned a moment ago, with some more thoughts about this amazing country and this fantastic adventure.
Jason, one of the things that I particularly, my senses are struck by whenever I go to a new place, a new country, is the sound of a country. And I think the Gambia definitely has that, because it has this proliferation of bird life, which is amazing. And you've travelled the length of the River Gambia. Is that something that strikes you as well, that sound of a place?
Yes, I think sound it's something we sort of tune in and out of, right? It's, you know, sometimes it's sort of just like blurs into the background. But I think in Gambia, when you sort of decide to tune in, there's such a sort of a beautiful cacophony, you know, whether it's the sounds of nature, or I kind of love the urban sounds as well. I love all the sort of the chat that just kind of merges together into some sort of crazy Tower of Babel. I love the sound of just people yelling at each other. I mean, in a nice way. The Gambians, especially the one, we have a sort of a bit of a joke there that, you know, people can be within about 2 feet of each other, but they seem to be talking at huge volume. And, you know, one of our Gambians friends said, "Oh, yeah, they still have their village voices." So meaning, so when you're in a village, you'll be like one side of the village to the other, and you'll be having a conversation across sort of 10 fence lines. But when people sort of move into the urban areas, they forget to sort of tune into urban volume.
An excited chatter, in other words.
Yeah. No, I think that the sound of the place is essential, and, you know, if you could just incorporate that into a still picture, would be wonderful. I guess there's no reason why you can't.
Tell me about the tribes, because there's a lot of tribes in the Gambia. They all get on harmoniously. There are two of the larger ones is Mandinka and Wolof. I think you speak a bit of one of them, don't you?
Yeah, my Mandinka, after all these years, our taxi driver still breaks certain parts of my body, because he said you should be completely fluent by now. But yeah, my Mandinka's, it's okay. You know, I can sort of get myself into trouble with it, as I say. Yeah, tribes, ethnic groups. I got told off one time for calling them tribes.
Yeah, I was wincing as I said it, because I wasn't sure whether that's the thing you can use.
No, I think it's one of those questions. I had the River Gambia expedition published in the New Yorker magazine, which is obviously my favorite magazine. You know, it's very literary, but it's very contemporary as well as publishing, you know, some of the great writers. And someone had made a comment on one of the pictures, and I'd mentioned the word tribes, and they said, oh, it showed a certain lack of education to use the word tribe. And I sort of was a bit stumped by that, because in Gambia, everyone refers to themselves which tribe they're from. They don't say I'm from this ethnic group or that ethnic group. They use the word tribe. So when I went back to Gambia, I did, you know, kind of just double check with people. So I think it's quite okay to use the word tribe, because the Gambians themselves use it. So I will go with what they prefer. Yeah, the main tribes are Mandinka, and then on the coastal areas you have Wolof, which are all along the Gambian coastline as well as the Senegalese coastline. It's always referred to as the language of traders. And then you have you have the Fullers, which are historically kind of the nomadic pastoralists. Then you have other ethnic groups, say the Serras, which are very famous as being the fishermen, and importantly you have the Jolas, which are one of the kind of older ethnic groups in the area. And each one is very identifiable as, I'd say, not on the street you wouldn't know who is who as such, but, you know, as far as sort of traditions and culturally, you know, each one has, you know, some very unique aspects to them, which we can certainly delve into on the expedition.
So looking forward to our time in Africa together in January. My thanks, Jason, for recording a few thoughts about this amazing country. We'll be making pictures and making stories, and actually making our own zine from the trip, which will be available as a download or a physical copy, as well as, you wouldn't expect me not to make a special podcast, which of course I shall be doing, and a film possibly too, since YouTube, my plans are to make the first of our Photowalk YouTubes while I'm away in Scotland, with the help of our guest speaker, Mally Davis, he of the trees, yes. Our YouTube channel is at last on the way. Right, back to your letters. This is, it's a sort of wish you were here, as well as a story from Sven Visnes, a Norwegian living in Brazil, who sent me something about his time in the Gambia. Now, there's a few pins on the map for you. Neil, I saw you're planning a trip to the Gambia next year. It's a wonderful and interesting country, and very flat. The highest point is something like 72 metres above sea level, if I remember correctly. I did not know this, Sven. But now I think about it, I don't remember being particularly out of breath on any of even my longer walks. So 72 metres, I didn't know that. That is indeed very flat. Some years ago, a friend of mine lived there for almost 2 years doing agricultural aid work. He now speaks one of the native languages fluently, Mandinka, I think. It could possibly well be Mandinka, yes. He invited me to go there, and I ended up going twice. And down to his understanding of the place and the language, it got me to see more than the average tourist. And that is what's very important about our trip as well. A visit to James Island, which we will be doing, and a meeting with some still living members of the Quinta family made a huge impression. Roots, the massive television film, was loosely based on a member of that family. Last I heard, the island is slowly disappearing due to erosion. Yeah, I think it does have some problems. Tourists and those who visit do hopefully, are respectful of that. We shall certainly be so. And that story, that island, it's one of the darker historic stories of the country, and we'll be talking about how to cover that part of our passage with dignity, definitely. But it's a very important part of our river expedition. We also drove a bit further inside the country, Neil, to visit a tourist camp that was built by a crazy Swede. I think you're talking about the Swedish captain, who was, I think he was understood to be reasonably eccentric, who in 1972 opened a place called Tender Bar, long before visitors arrived in any real number. On my main Instagram account, which I will link to, by the way, there's one picture that's different from all the others of origin. While all the other images on my account started out as digital, this particular photograph was shot on Velvia slide film with my trusted Canon A1 camera, which, by the way, I know of, Sven, because that was the first, I hope I'm right now, SLR to have an auto exposure mode, wasn't it? Stand by, Neil, for a swathe of letters saying, no, I think you'll find it was the etc., but I'm pretty sure I'm right with that. Anyway, says Sven, the picture is called Return of a Fisherman. I was walking along the beach with my camera and saw this guy casting his net. Hoping to get a picture as he was casting, I moved a little closer. But he suddenly decided to call it a day, got out of the water and started walking up the beach toward me, done for his day's work. I had a 300mm lens on my camera and only a few seconds to get a couple of shots before he got way too close. And this is the result from our happy chance meeting. To anyone thinking if they should go there, stop thinking, says Sven. You're like PR here. Just do it. You'll not regret it. And make sure you try the local food, especially the domodar. Yes, the domodar. It's a stew with a sauce made from peanuts. Now, not everybody loves peanuts, so I appreciate it. I happen to be a bit of a peanut fan. So for me, domodar, it is like dream food. I suggested we try to make it back in the UK. I haven't. The royal we managed to do this at all. Not with any authenticity. It's a dish, it seems to me, that only Gambian chefs seem able to make. It's one of my favourites, definitely. So yeah, domodar for 10 days, don't mind if I do. Anyway, he says, don't eat the hot pepper. That's true, don't eat the hot pepper. I'm not sure they serve the hot pepper with the domodar, though. Do they? I don't recall that being... or maybe they do. I shall have to try that version. Sven, you're practically like my PR department, sir, but for all the right reasons, with a fabulous picture of this fisherman, who I'm thinking had just possibly climbed, almost definitely climbed from a pirogue, which are these wonderful, colourful boats, which we'll be seeing and photographing. And I believe on one of the river parts of our 10 days there, part of the river expedition that we have, we're going to be using a pirogue to cross the mouth of the river between a place called Banjul, which is the capital city, and Barra. Right, what are you doing, pups? Look at you, you're covered in mud. I've got to take you in the hire car in a moment. You're not even supposed to be in it. It's not even a hire car, it's a loan car. They've been very kind, they've loaned me this. And with the strict instructions I saw on the piece of paper, do not take dogs in the car. I've put some blankets in there, but the amount of mud that's on this dog, Barney, honestly. Right, first Friday of the month, we should set an assignment, shouldn't we? And decide a winner from last month, or as I like to call it now. It's not quite so catchy, but a caught my eye from last month, which I shall do in a moment. This month is being set by the celebrated street photographer and Englishman in New York, Phil Penman, who is, by the way, next week's guest. This is going to challenge you. So good luck. And even though it's being set in September, if you hear this in, say, October or November or December or in 2024 because you're playing catch-up, not a problem. You can join in with these whenever you wish. So, who would like a big challenge? One of our biggest yet, which no doubt Phil will be checking in on too. I see a few hands going up. At the back of the class, though, a little tentatively, my other listener, oh no, they seem to be dissolving under their desk into a puddle, just like I used to in chemistry lessons. Please don't make me turn the Bunsen burner on. Not if you want to display like we had last week. Here's Phil Penman, anyway, with your September, I can't believe I'm saying this already, with your September assignment.
The Photowalk assignment.
This, Phil, is an assignment that, having chatted about it with you, will certainly have me thinking differently when I shoot pictures at say, a wedding or a social event. Think like you're gathering a news story. So it's not a single picture challenge, although let me not spoil it, it's your assignment. But I guess your news background certainly prepared you well for what is now your successful career in photographing on the street.
Yeah, I think, although I hated it, news photography taught me so much.
Yeah, it did.
You learn a lot from it. And getting my ass handed to me by photo editors helped me a lot as well. So what I find with a lot of photographers, they'll stick to one lens and they generally shoot with the same angle.
Yeah.
You know, and everything kind of looks the same. So I would say a good assignment would be to pick a subject. It could be your local football club, you know, your local sports team, a fishing village, something that's near to you.
Right.
And you have to look at it, it's not one picture, it's say 15, 20 different pictures, it's a feature. So that when someone sees it, they can tell a story from it. So it could be, say you're doing a fishing village as an example, right? It would be, you know, it's not just going to be a picture of someone with a fishing rod. It's going to be the portrait, it's going to be what they caught, it's the tight shot, the wide shot, what's the location, where are they shooting? Like, you need to be able to shoot 15 different angles, different lenses, like not just sticking to one lens.
This is a collection of pictures we're looking for.
This is a collection of pictures that tell a story so that someone who doesn't know you at all could look at it and know, right, oh, that was shot at this fishing village in Wales. There's a picture of the sign. There's the whole story, and it has to be shot on multiple lenses,
different lenses,
and multiple angles. Like it needs to look. It's not the same shot over and over. Like, get out of your comfort zone.
So establishing shots, close up, detail, portrait, however it turns. Because these don't necessarily have to include people, or should they?
They don't necessarily have to, but it needs to be getting out of that comfort zone and shooting a variation of lots of different angles. And one thing I'll do as well is, even when you think you've got the one shot, look behind you and think about how many different ways you could get that shot. It could be shooting through a window to frame it. It could be using a reflection.
Yeah.
You're constantly trying to outdo your last picture. And I guarantee you, if you take that approach and you start doing that with everything you do, you will get so much better as a photographer.
The Photowalk assignment.
Phil Penman's assignment for the month, which will be on the assignments page alongside the Caught My Eye winner from last month, which was set by Valerie Jardin, where she challenged us to make a photograph in difficult light conditions. So we're right up to the wire on this one as I make my decision for my Caught My Eye winner. So I'm going to lean on Studio Neil now, my alter ego, back in studio to announce I don't know why I did that, sorry, to announce the winner of the famous, not so famous, as it starts to rain as well. Come on, Pops, we're going to head back toward the car. See how much mess we can make on the front seat. As we announce the winner of the famous, not so famous flask. And I bet you're not having a battle with the rain, are you, Studio Neil?
Oh, it's beautiful and warm and dry in here. What are you moaning about? So, the one that caught our eye for August, the picture that addressed making a photograph in tricky light, was, silent drum roll please, Anthony Hibble. Well, he caught my eye with the photograph that's it's a flip, essentially. As he says, if I'm really honest, I was quite excited when I heard this assignment, as I love making photographs in harsh light. With harsh light comes deep shadows, which at first I'd tried to avoid in my photography, but now I love to use them as much as I can. In the photograph I've chosen, I came across these two people having a slightly heated exchange whilst out doing some street photography. I quickly positioned myself using the sun as a backlight. I loved the way their shadows looked more animated than they did themselves. With that in mind, I decided to flip the image to make the shadows the focal point of the picture. I was so engrossed in getting the photo right, I never did find out if they ever made up. So we have mystery as well. Congratulations, Anthony Hibble. The famous not so famous flask is en route.
Right, flask dispatched. Good luck for this month's challenge, which has been set by Phil Penman, who is my guest next week. And the week after that, of course, is the Scottish edition, walking with those who are coming on our photographic retreat and our adventure to Inverness, a city on Scotland's northeast coast where the River Ness, the famous River Ness, which of course flows into the loch, meets the Moray Firth, the largest city and the cultural capital of the Scottish Highlands. Very, very much looking forward to taking you with us on the show. And, we're doing so much. We're in the dark room. We were in the dark room last year. We'll be going into the dark room again, making some prints. And also, I think we're doing some mounting of said art prints. We're producing a zine from the week. Didn't do that last year. We're doing that this year to show the story of the week. All sorts of stuff. The food as well. Especially the Scottish nights, as you would expect that we will be having. So very much looking forward to joining some friends on the Scottish photo retreat for 2023. By the way, we've already booked for 2024. We'll be changing it up slightly next year because the two retreats that we've had that feature different guests. So experience-wise, they won't have had the experience that last year's had, but we'll be changing it up a bit for next year. But back in Inverness in 2024 as well. Right, part 2 of my conversation with 7 Agencies' Ylvi Niakiktian, my guest for this week, a storyteller, a photojournalist, and I know that this will be, I say I know, Ylvi, I'm sure this will be the first of a few conversations we have, won't it? He says, looking into the ether, very hopefully.
Let's talk more about your projects in South Africa. And by the way, during the short break, we found the photographer who made those extraordinary contrast pictures between communities living cheek by jowl who have total polar opposite lives in terms of wealth. The story in The Guardian is called The Drone Work That Sums Up Global Inequality, and I'll link to it on the show page today. But let's talk about sound, which has had a reference already, and this way in which you join the senses together to tell your powerful stories. I know still photographs can paint pictures that make you believe you can see the story develop and hear and taste and smell, but you've had moments where employing moving images or indeed sounds, that potent sound of something, is such an important part of the overall recipe of your storytelling.
Yeah, so true, because interesting is that the Afrikaner Blood, which was a story about the racist camp that I mentioned earlier. When entering the camp, it was led by this colonel that used to be a colonel in the former white South African army. He was leading a camp to basically teach young white kids that white kids were superior. Just horrible stuff. But when I entered the camp at the first moment with my colleague Alice van Gelder, who was at the time, she was only a writer and I was at the time only a photographer. But when we entered the camp and he was saying all these very racist things, we knew immediately that we also had to do video and audio because people were just not going to believe it. And also because you can't really see that this white man is an extreme right-wing racist guy. Simply because you can't really see that. He didn't have like a swastika tattoo on his forehead, for instance. No, he just looked like a normal kind of dude.
I think you described him as looking like everybody's favorite grandparent.
Totally. So we were really struggling in the first day when we were only photographing and she was only writing. Like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And then we realized we need to do audio, we need to do video, but we had never, ever done it before. So we tried to Google it while being in this very remote camp. There was only a little bit of phone signal.
Yeah.
We tried to Google which settings the camera had to be on. And when you are doing an interview, does the person look into the camera or look at you? Do they sit left or right? We were totally clueless. And we just recorded whatever we thought was right and whatever we thought needed to be recorded. And then in the end, we made a short documentary. And that's the documentary that won a first prize at the World Press Photo, which was, of course, insanely incredible, but also funny in a way if the jury would have realized we had to Google our way through the video functions of my camera. We were totally clueless.
You can tell them now. I apologize that we've gone all out of sync with this. If I was a better interviewer, then no doubt by now we'd have had this all in the right order. But I'm gonna go backwards slightly, if you don't mind. We've gone from Born Free to Prepared to Flee, but I do want to come back to Afrikaner Blood because it is important. Prepared to Flee. Now, that's another incredible project. Made again, yes, in South Africa. Involves another fringe group. But they're convinced that life is about to break down as they know it in South Africa. And I don't want to sound flippant, but they felt to me like a community of meerkats constantly looking around themselves, not trusting even the wind blowing the dust around them, that something terrible could just about to be happening to them. It must have been a very difficult story to tell because this is a group of people that fear is part of their daily life. And here's a photojournalist coming into their life who is asking questions, which for them I would have thought must have been quite a fearful thing in itself.
Yeah. So these people were basically afraid. This was shot in 2010, and they were basically afraid that war would break out when Mandela would die, Nelson Mandela would die.
Yeah.
At the time, he was still alive. So they were just like very much alive. He wasn't in hospital, nothing. He was just a healthy ex-president of the country. But they were so fearful. And they were also very fearful of Alice and I joining them on their trips around the country where they were kind of trying to tell other people that it was that they were afraid that a war would break out and that people needed to join them. I think one of the reasons they let us in on this trip with them and they let us in photographing in their homes is because we could kind of speak the language. Afrikaans and Dutch is very similar to each other. So that really helped. I think that gained part of the trust and the fact that we were white, of course. I mean, that's truly in this sense, white privilege is that one of my lovely and amazing South African black photographer friends, none of them would have ever been able to tell this story.
Right.
So in a way, it was also it's a very fringe story. Not every white South African was afraid most of them aren't actually, of a war breaking out when Nelson Mandela passed away. But they were so afraid that they were literally going around the country where they were gathering hundreds of people into big hallways, spreading the word that this would happen, that a war would break out. And that alone was so interesting to me, that just a bunch of people could spread so much fear.
It felt to me like the fear missionary, some of those pictures.
Yeah.
Watching them all in these halls, listening to somebody telling them why they should be frightened.
Totally. I think it's very similar to the Doomsday Preppers. I mean, it was kind of doomsday prepping in a way. And they were doing the same thing. Most of these people we followed had tin cans with, hundreds of tin cans with beans in storage, or they were digging holes next to their homes to put food and water. And yeah. Sometimes I wonder about how are they doing? Where are they? Because Mandela died a couple of years after. I contacted them at the time. And of course, a war did not happen. And I called them saying, okay, what is your plan now? Because he has passed away. There's no war. And they said, oh, but one day there will be a war.
Yeah.
You just watch.
Yeah.
So
returning to Afrikaner blood then. Because I do have another couple of questions about that. These are fringe groups. It's important to recognise that not the entire continent does not think this, or that country does not think this way.
Definitely not. It's very. The best way to compare them is to like neo-Nazi.
Yeah,
it's small groups, but they are loud, or they can be loud. Yeah.
I'm intrigued actually to how you keep a pictorial air of neutrality, which you seem to do. It's a bit like I've always wanted to ask one, and one day I'll have the opportunity to ask a defence lawyer, how on earth do you defend somebody who in your heart you know is guilty? When you're making photographs, you're going in there as a photojournalist. Not necessarily, because it would be very easy to pick holes in them straight away and show them as this monstrous group. You didn't do that, though, did you?
No, that's an interesting question, because it's always difficult to answer. In me and in my heart, and also in the journalist's heart, in Ella's heart, when we were at this racist camp, we just wanted to save the kids, take them outside of the camp, bring them back to their parents, and we wanted to smack the colonel of the camp, who was in his 60s and telling these kids all these horrible things. So we were as the days passed by, we felt more anger towards him. At the same time, though, you are there to document the story, so that's what we were doing. And also, you see very much in every human being I've encountered so far in my job, even the most horrible people, you kind of see a human side, but on the other side of the spectrum. So, for instance, with this colonel who was a horrible racist, which I think is disgusting, at the same time, I saw him cry when his daughter was in a very bad car accident. Wow. And he became this very loving dad that was worried, like any other person would be if their daughter would be in a bad car crash. So I don't know how to put this in the best way I can, but I always try to see the human side. A lot of horrible things in the world happen because people are afraid of something. And usually this fear is not even necessary, but it's usually very fearful people who do horrible shit. Yeah. And I try to remember that when I'm working on stories where I encounter horrible people, is that they're kind of afraid people. I really try to photograph them the same way as I photograph anyone else. Yeah. But it's very difficult because we were getting more angry every day. I'm of, my father is of Chinese descent. And the colonel of the camp not only hated black people, but also Chinese people.
Oh.
So he was constantly making bad jokes about Chinese and saying how they were stealing in Africa and that they're horrible people that you can never trust and they're stupid and so on. And here I am thinking of my dad, who's half Chinese, and my grandfather, who's full Chinese. And after a couple of days, I had to tell him, I was like, well, you've been talking very badly about Chinese people. And here I am. I'm a quarter Chinese. And you're not like hating me, are you? Why are you saying this?
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of put a mirror in front of him and say, hey, but he would always turn around and say, well, you are then just one of the nicer kinds, for instance, which is even worse. He would just make it worse. But I just try to keep distance, but I also try to stay honest towards myself.
The story was a huge success in loads of countries in terms of being featured in important magazines and newspapers. No more important than, of course, appearing in the newspapers in South Africa. Of course, he then got to see the story and how it reflected upon him. He was being recognised when he went out. And you were very fearful. I heard you in an interview suggesting you were very fearful of what he might do to you, even so much as worrying that he might even be able to reach you back in the Netherlands.
Totally.
But the story didn't turn out that way.
No.
Actually, he thanked you.
I know, it was horrible. It was even worse. I think I would have rather been in trouble in another way. Yeah, I was really afraid I would get shot or killed or whatever. But in the end, when I finally dared to call him after the story published in South Africa and he had to hide, I called him and then he picked up the phone and at first he was quiet and I was like, oh God, he must be so angry because there were thousands of negative remarks. And then he said, Ilvi, I really want to thank you and Alice, the writer, because we have been getting many negative remarks, but those people are just crazy. We're very happy with the positive remarks because it's drawing so much attention to the camp. Like we've recruited so many new people. Everyone wants to sign up for the racist camp. And I was like, no, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, that's the side effect that the story had.
You weren't expecting.
Horrible.
Yeah. You've been telling the story of Ukraine for some time now, pre this terrible war as well. And one of these brings a story closer to your home in the Netherlands. A small country of 16 million people, as you write. There are empty houses, empty offices, empty seats belonging to 194 Dutch nationals who died after Malaysia Airline Flight 17 was shot down over the sky in eastern Ukraine. And of course, there are still many, many questions today about who did that, so on and so forth. Such a story of sadness. How did you go about making this story? Because the rooms in the pictures, I mean, it's almost like the people are still here with us. I mean, in fact, one of the pictures, the bed has never been remade.
I know. Yeah, it was one of the most, I wouldn't say difficult stories, but it was maybe the first story that came so close to home. I had, before this point, only been photographing mostly in South Africa and in other African countries. But this was a story about a plane that crashed over Ukraine, but with almost all of the people in this MH17 were Dutch.
Yeah.
So it was people that kind of, that via, it's a small country. So you would kind of know some of them, like, oh, was that your cousin? Or, oh, that's the neighbor of so-and-so. Or, so it really came close to home. And there was a lot of media frenzy around it because everyone wanted to tell personal stories. All the media were like, oh, we want to interview family members. So everyone in the plane crash died. So what people did once the lists of names were provided by the airlines, journalists were just gonna go to houses and stand in front and ask family members that were coming to the house about, oh, what happened? Like, what happened with your family? How many people were on board of your family? And it was really horrible.
They call it the collect in this country, where you go
going for just quotes or...
Yeah, well, you go and collect a picture of those who have passed from a relative. I can't imagine anything.
No, it was just horrible. And the worst thing that was happening, that later on family members told me, is that fake stories were circulating in major media outlets of people because they made stories from Facebook posts. So journalists were trying to stitch these stories together from Facebook and Instagram and these kind of posts. So I didn't want to be one of those, but I did want to make a story. So I started reaching out to families via, because it's a small country, you would kind of have contacts somehow. And I was reaching out to families saying, I don't need a big interview. I don't want any pictures of the relatives that you lost, but I want to ask you if it would be okay for you if I would photograph the house, like one room or maybe an office space or maybe any space that was close to this person. And all of them really, first of all, and I was very nervous making these phone calls, all of them appreciated that I wasn't just taking pictures from Facebook. And it became a collection of bedrooms, living rooms, offices of people that died in this plane crash. And one of the families I will never forget was a family with 2 daughters, young daughters. And when I entered their rooms, they were, full of toys and pink walls and pictures on the wall of them with their parents. And the whole house was just empty, of course. The parents died, the 2 young girls died. And it was a really crazy experience. And after the MH17 crash is now 9 years ago. And I went back to the houses after 5 years and I photographed it again. And some of the rooms hadn't been touched. The beds had not been made. Even after 5 years, the rooms are still the same. for some of these.
Unbelievable to think it was 9 years ago. There was me thinking this is not that long ago, and it was.
I know, it's crazy, yeah.
How do you decompress, Elvie? I know we've talked about the wonderful birthday stories that you shot, and that comes full circle from talking about the harder stories that you photographed, which are important and will always be a part of your important portfolio. But how do you decompress? How do you? I mean, I would imagine it's something photographic or something in a storytelling sense.
Well, I must say, for the longest time, I never decompressed, because until 2015, I was mainly working, going from the one story to the other. I would say till 2017, maybe even. I was constantly in South Africa working on Born Free. I was constantly on the road. And then I kind of hit a wall, as you do when you work in this way. And then I realized, okay, I need to find ways to decompress, because otherwise I can't continue this job. I think what has helped me the most in this industry is the fact that I have one solid place, a house that's always there, that I love being there in my own space. And it gives me a calm idea that it's in the place where I grew up as well. So everyone is here. My family is here. My sisters, my brother, my father, all my friends are here. My friends from back when I was growing up. Yeah. So whenever I would return from trips or from difficult situations, I could always decompress in the world that kind of stood still. I know that my friends and family are not standing still, but to me, it sometimes felt like nothing changes compared to I would live in a different place. I would be gone for 6 months, but I would always return to the same place where the life was still similar. And that for me has been, I think, my savior. I don't think I would ever want to sell my house, because it's in the kind of in the middle of where everyone I know is. And it just calms me down to know when I'm far away that is always there.
I was going to say, you don't want to be too far away from the boat either.
No, because in the summer I'm always on the boat here with my family. We're swimming. Yeah, it's the perfect spot.
Being a 7 photographer, being in that fold, what does that mean to you?
That's really good combination actually with the answer I just gave to me. And I know it's a bit of a romantic kind of answer maybe to some listeners.
I like romantic
Okay. Okay, good. Because here I go. No, to me it really feels like family.
Yeah.
And that's also when I joined 7 in 2017. I did an application. I applied to be in 7, and I remember having to write my reasons why I wanted that. And I know a lot of people who applied wrote something like, oh, I'm hoping for more assignments, or I didn't write that. I wasn't hoping for more assignments. I've always been quite, luckily, knock on wood, doing well with assignments. But I wanted to join, and that's what I wrote, for 2 reasons. One of them, I wanted my archive to be in a spot where I know it's safe. That was one. And 2, I wanted to be part of a group of people who create things, who are creatives, who are in the same industry, who you can call when you're having a problem or maybe when you're stuck in a story, and at the same time who always know what you're going through, and you can do group projects with, and you can talk to when you have new ideas, be creative together. So that's the reason, that's what I put down in my application. And when Gary Knight called me in October 2017 to say, you are a new member, I really could feel the relief of being able to join a group that by default is already kind of a strong group. So that's what it means to me, to be part of something and feel safe within that structure.
Well, I'm going to ask you for another unashamed romantic moment as well in that case then, because I think it might lean this way with your answer to what is my favourite and finally question, which is, what is your why?
Oh, what is my why? I think my why became, to me, most apparent when I was working in those 12 years in South Africa. Because you cannot work on something for 12 years if you don't know why. So basically, my Born Free story is about the young generation of people growing up in South Africa after apartheid ended. And I always just took that as a given. That was the reason I was photographing the story, because I thought it was interesting. But I felt that's not a strong enough why. Why do you want to do a certain story? Why are you a photojournalist? Why are you working on long-term stories? And to be very honest, I think my why kind of goes back to my whole existence and the fact that I feel as a person, I want to dive into something because I want to know more. And by telling stories, I realized, okay, if I want to know more, I'm guessing other people also want to know more. And I want to share what I'm learning in this storytelling with others. I want to show what the story is about, and not only for the viewer, but also for the people in the story. I feel so privileged to have a link to bigger outlets because I know that stories can transform the reader, but also the person that is in the story. It kind of goes both ways. So for me, the why is both of my parents were teachers. And I think my why kind of stems from that. I kind of want to teach or tell or share experience, I would say, by telling stories. I guess that's my why.
And my thanks to Ylvi Nierkiktian. All her links to websites, Instagram, etc. will be on the show page today. Should we do another picture? It's really raining now, which is quite nice. You get the fresh smell, don't you, of the vegetation around you, particularly when I walk along a canal side. It's a picture of green, a picture of green. I'm using the X Pro 1 today, the Fujifilm X Pro 1, with a vintage lens gifted to me by... Yes, you got it right, Tim Binder. See, you do remember. What did I used to call it, Tim? The gift that keeps on giving. I've had this vintage lens now. It's 28 millimeter, which becomes 40 something, doesn't it? On the end of this APS-C camera. Here we go. I am a little bit concerned about and I know we started the show talking about imperfection, but I'm a little bit concerned about my focus today. Anyway, we'll look at that on a much larger screen, hid behind a sofa later on. That's it for today. Though if you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 52 is waiting for you. And this week I'm joined by Extra Miler Paul Hudson, a writer and explorer with a camera who shares pictures and stories from his visit to Istanbul this summer, a trip that held a few new discoveries.
On this week's Extra Mile.
When Hattie and I went to Turkey in 1992 on this road trip, I always remember seeing a guy like him, which I think is a classic Turkish face, and I wanted to try and make a portrait of him and I didn't manage to. And one of the things I had in my head for this trip was if I came across such a guy this time, I'd make sure. So I went up to this chap. He didn't speak English, but his daughter was next to him, and I guess she did, and she engaged with me. And I said, can you ask, I think I said her father, I'm not sure it was her father actually, if I could make a portrait of him, and he was only too happy, and I made that picture, which I'm really pleased with, because what's interesting is there are a lot of Turkish guys that walk around still, which you don't see in the UK, in beautifully tailored suits and snazzy sharp watches and shoes.
Yeah, he looks like it himself, yeah.
Turkish tash and those Turkish features, which I really like.
The Extra Mile is part of our Patreon channel, where our wonderful community of walkers and photographers who want to help keep this podcast here week after week make a modest and generous monthly or annual contribution starting at, well, as little as £3 a week. Less than, I am told, by my son, who delivers the Sunday papers. I know I should know this. Less than most of the newspapers that he actually delivers through the door. I couldn't believe that, but the Sunday sups have become a little bit more expensive these days. Over here, Pups, there's a runner coming along. Sit, look at the state of you. Honestly. I went out with a brown dog. I've come back with a grey one. Morning. Enjoy your run. Come on, Pups, this way. The first 5 minutes of the show, they're available for free. So click the link on the website with the Extra Mile, and you'll find that. It's usually just the introduction, though. You don't tend to, well, I don't think you ever get to hear the guests, but at least you get a sort of feel for the show. And I mentioned too, for our InVision Zoom show, which happens on the first Tuesday of each month. The next one coming up, if you're listening to this on the day it was intended, is Tuesday, the 5th of September. What have you got there? Look, he's got the inner sole of a runner's shoe. Not the runner's shoe that's just gone past, is it? Oh, I hope not. Our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said today. It's been, I think, in terms of what's been discussed on the show today, plenty to think about. The song's from an artist I've not featured before. It's Jasmine Jang. It's a wonderfully dreamy song. It's one of my drifters, this one. It's called Fractals. Are we just smaller versions of a bigger whole? Are you the rivers in your veins? Am I the flakes that become snow? Oh, when I grow up, pups, I want to be able to write like that. Jasmine Jang is a Chinese-American singer-songwriter. She's based in New York, and she makes music to tell stories and challenge the way we understand ourselves and the world around us, and also build community, which in all ways, I was going to say many, but I think the word is all, in all ways, is what I'm trying to do and what we're trying to do together with our community right here on the Photowalk show. So back in a moment with some closing thoughts in the form of this week's PS. But while we walk and make some more pictures, here's Fractals.
Are we just smaller versions of a bigger home? Are you the rivers in your veins? Am I the flakes that become snow? And you might believe that everything is broken. Fragments of sentences we haven't spoken. But maybe, are we just jagged lines across a barren sea? Are the shapes inside a sundisk the same as the arms of trees, and saying we're a shell of what we used to be? Maybe we're smaller. Are we just smaller? And I get lost in finding comfort this time. Fractals all around us, in hopes that I have found us. There's beauty in these broken designs. Now I know there is nothing to be fixed. Oh, can we exist unfinished? Are we just clouds up in the northern hemisphere, taking up dreams that I've left for, that you've always feared? And you'll get mad at the world for spinning round and round, looking for a safe and sound. And I get lost in finding comfort this time. Fractals all around us, in hopes that I have found us. There's beauty in these broken designs. Now I know there is nothing to be fixed. I know if the miles get long, I'll still see you up the road. Even though this is all no, I'll keep carrying a little. These lines stretch on and on and on. Are we just searching for a little highway map? Are the lines between us just a path to a vacant past? And you still make me think of what we used to be. Maybe we're smaller. Are we just small?
Is that the slight murmur of thunder? There is thunder on the charts today. Or is it an inbound 737 to Heathrow? I think it's probably the latter. Anyway, that was Jasmine Jang and Fractals. Marvellous, brilliant, beautiful song. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building this community of kindness, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing we love, photographing and walking and hiking and sharing. Talking of which, on the show page there are some very handy buttons now that we've put them on there to help you share the show. But also be sure to press that follow. Don't start barking now, pups. We're almost done. Or subscribe button on your podcast app. Mid-sentence, pups, don't forget to press the subscribe on your podcast player app. Do you want another one of these? Go on then. Look at you. Some dogs, honestly, they are like when they're wet. It's almost like even when they swim, it's like they've not been affected by the water at all. Pups, you look like a chamois leather. Honestly, don't walk on the letters. Oh, no, don't. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook membership. Right. Oh, sorry. Cyclist going by. Mind out the way, pups. Good boy. Come here. Pups, this way. That's very good. Now, in the past, he might have chased her because she's playing Chemical Brothers or something like that. Is that Chemical Brothers? He loves a bit of Chemical Brothers. Right, a postscript for the show. Today it's from Wayne Dyer, who spoke around the world on self-development and mental well-being. He sadly passed in 2015 in a place that, sadly again has been making the news for all the wrong reasons this summer, Maui. But the PS, his quote, is one that, yes, it wasn't written for photography, but I think it works very, very well. It definitely works for photography as a PS. It's from Dr. Wayne Dyer. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.